Hello, everyone, and welcome. Some of the stories we have for you right now. Contempt for Canada on the world stage. Strong words from Donald Trump about his neighbor to the north.
Say you can always become a state. Then if you're a state, we won't have a deficit, we won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But Canada has been very tough to deal with.
And Trump's demands to global allies when it comes to NATO.
I am so buoyed by the support.
I am so grateful.
Deadline day for the Liberal leadership race. Who's in and who's out?
They're here with guns in their laps like they're cell phones.
Wanted, why police are releasing this footage from the scene of a brazen gunfight.
And sugarcane.
For decades, there were reports of neglect and children dying.
Plus Northern nods, Canada's key role on the road to the Oscars.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Donald Trump reignited his calls for Canada to become the 51st state to avoid the threat of tariffs. During his first major address to world leaders at the Davos Economic Forum, in fact, he mentioned Canada a lot. Trump saying we are difficult to deal with, that the U.S. doesn't need us for cars, lumber, oil, or gas. And he threw in the ask for all members of the NATO alliance to significantly increase defense spending to 5% of GDP from the current 2%. CTV's Judy Trin has a lot to unpack. Okay, Judy, where would you like to begin?
This is Donald Trump once again using aggressive negotiating tactics.
Hello.
Appearing virtually at the World Economic Forum, President Donald Trump once again complained about importing more from Canada than it exported.
We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas.
The trade war hasn't started yet, but 25% tariffs could be imposed as soon as February 1st.
One goal, not to figure out how to manage these tariffs and live with them over the long term, but to figure out how to get them removed as quickly as possible.
Part of that strategy also includes reaching the NATO 2% target during Trump's term instead of the 2032 timeline the government previously set.
We think that because of the investments that we're going to have to make over the next 4 or 5 years in national defense, it is going to give us an opportunity to do business with Americans where it makes sense for Canadians.
We could bring in capabilities and the spending earlier. Why? Because the longer we wait, the less we can get for the same amount of money.
But Trump is moving the bar again, demanding a new NATO spending target.
I'm also going to ask all NATO nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, which is what it should have been years ago.
Not one of NATO's 32 members are even close to that number. The biggest contributor, Poland, is at 4.1%. The U.S. is approximately at 3.4%. Canada is spending 1.37% of its GDP, which equals $41 billion a year. Getting to Trump's target would require increasing that to $150 billion annually. Canada's inability to meet its military obligations to NATO has been a trade irritant with the U.S. for years. Now it's a gaping wound that makes us vulnerable in a trade war with the Americans. Sandy.
Okay, CTV's Judy Trin. Now, in his Davos address, Trump also referred to the past 72 hours as a revolution of common sense, and he cited all the changes that he's initiated, including the arrest of illegal immigrants. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon now on the operation to round up and deport.
The White House says the crackdown has already begun. In Boston, federal agents taking this man into custody as communities brace for mass deportations of undocumented immigrants, as promised by President Donald Trump. After declaring a national emergency at the southern border, the first of 1,500 active duty troops are set to arrive, along with planes and helicopters in a show of force. Thousands of migrants trying to gain entry in the United States have been left in limbo. The mobile app set up by the Biden administration to gain asylum no longer works. And refugee admissions into the country halted indefinitely.
It's a very scary time with this new administration, and I want to make sure that our immigrant community, our Latino community, that everybody knows that they're not alone.
Part of the president's hardline immigration actions.
It's ridiculous. We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright.
Trump signed an executive action to overturn a century-old constitutional right that grants citizenship to babies born on U.S. soil to undocumented parents. But a federal judge in Seattle took only 25 minutes to block Trump's order.
I was not surprised to see Judge Kuhnauer sort of dismiss the absurdity of the order and the absurdity of the president's action.
22 states sued, arguing the president, with a stroke of a pen, cannot write the 14th Amendment out of existence. Donald Trump's first defeat in the first days of his presidency. Joy Melvin, CTV News, Washington.
Now, as we heard in Judy's report, the Prime Minister responded strongly to Donald Trump's often repeated tariff threats while he was meeting with the Liberal National Caucus in Ottawa. The conversation happening on deadline day for candidates to enter the leadership race. Everyone who wants in has to be in. And as of right now, there are 7 candidates to replace Justin Trudeau, including Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, and former House Leader Karina Gould. Okay, let's bring in CTV's Mike Couture. And Mike, more Liberals are revealing who they support, so tell us.
Sandy, with the Liberal caucus coming together, divisions are beginning to show as people throw their support behind leadership candidates.
I'm definitely endorsing Mark Carney.
I'm supporting Chrystia Freeland.
As Liberals line up behind their choice for leader, CTV News has confirmed Quebec Cabinet Minister François-Philippe Champagne is set to endorse Mark Carney this weekend, even though he wouldn't confirm it today.
Wait until the end of the week, I would say, but someone who share my vision, of an ambitious Canada, of a confident Canada, of a prosperous Canada.
While Carney gained support from cabinet ministers, Chrystia Freeland was flanked by 2 supporting her as she arrived for the meeting, talking about her leadership.
For me, a huge emphasis is going to be reviving the party.
Other contenders believe that revival begins with them. Jaime Batiste kicked off his campaign hoping to be the first Indigenous Prime Minister of Canada, and Karina Gould finalized her paperwork, promising to be more in touch with Canadians.
I think we have to be honest about the fact that Canadians have lost trust in our party. And part of it is because I don't think we responded to the issues that they were telling us mattered to them.
That admission comes as contenders lay out positions contradicting current party policy. Freeland has said she would scrap the consumer carbon tax and roll back changes to the capital gains inclusion rate, 2 policies she defended as finance minister.
There's no flip-flopping here. It's purely an evolution in a positive direction. I'm quite happy about it.
I was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories.
Without a seat in Parliament, Carney was not at caucus, but he released a new ad promoting his positions and his pedigree.
When the markets crashed in 2008, I worked with a Conservative Prime Minister to protect Canadian homes.
The leadership race will now really ramp up as both Carney and Freeland are expected to hold separate meetings with Liberals in Ottawa to court more support. Sandy?
All right, Mike. Well, the Supreme Court of Canada will hear an appeal of Quebec's controversial Bill 21, which bans civil servants in positions of authority from wearing religious symbols.
In reality, it's a law, a populist law, designed to capitalize on popular feelings of angst surrounding religious minorities, particularly women in hijab. It's a law that divides society.
The law was passed in 2019, and opponents have been fighting against it ever since. The Quebec government has long argued the law is reasonable, and the province's justice minister has said he will vigorously defend it. Police in Toronto have made 14 new arrests and laid more than 100 charges in relation to a reckless gunfight in the city's downtown. And they released stunning video. It shows multiple people carelessly handling and firing illegal weapons, several of which police say were modified to be fully automatic. CTV's Janice Golding reports.
I want these faces to get out there. We need to find these people. We need to get them off the street.
Inspector Paul Krajcik shows the media shocking video from a party that preceded a gunfight outside a recording studio. A group of men who were gathered at a birthday celebration brazenly handling weapons. Quote, guns treated like toys and lives treated as afterthoughts. Police allege at 11:20 p.m. Monday, November the 11th, plainclothes officers were conducting an investigation outside the recording studio when 3 armed people exited a stolen vehicle, firing on the back of the building. As you can see from the video, people inside the recording studio returned fire, and the original 3 shooters took cover behind an unmarked police vehicle. The car, which was occupied by 2 police officers, was struck by bullets several times. As the original suspects tried to flee the scene, their stolen car was hit and disabled by another unmarked police vehicle, and 3 suspects fled on foot. Initially, 23 people were arrested, 8 people were charged, and 16 firearms seized. Today, police announced they've made 14 additional arrests, and 105 charges have been laid in Project Poppy.
There's a couple things that strike me when I look at that video. First of all, the casualness of what they're here with guns in their laps like they're cell phones. They're dancing around, celebrating basically with these guns, jumping around. They don't have a care in the world. It's like they don't expect that they're going to get caught with this. So whatever we've done in society that's allowed these people to have the confidence to do this thing, I'm obviously not going to figure that out tonight or today, but the reality is something has allowed them to be this comfortable, posted on social media.
9 suspects remain outstanding, however. In this image, you see Caleb Ojulati-Stewart, Noah Belnavis-Esu, Delano Williams, and Olad Olad. In this next image, you see Donnery Walker, Jamarlee Smith, Jadane Hamblett, and Mohammed Carey. The image of a 17-year-old has not been released because his identity is protected under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Janice Golding, CTV News.
A teenager in England who killed 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class has been sentenced to more than 50 years in prison.
What he did on the 29th of July last year has caused such shock and revulsion to the whole nation that it must be viewed as being at the very extreme level of crime.
The accused was charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 of attempted murder in the stabbing attack that also injured 8 other girls and 2 adults. The attack shocked the country, setting off anti-immigrant violence over incorrect reports the attacker was an asylum seeker. And members of the Sackler family in the United States who own OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma agreed to increase their settlement to $7.4 billion U.S. in a massive opioid case. The lawsuits claim Purdue Pharma aggressively marketed opioids for decades, leading to waves of addiction and overdose deaths. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2019 after facing thousands of lawsuits. Under the new agreement, the family will give up control of the company, and the money will go to support addiction recovery programs. Coming up, a political cliffhanger.
Stay tuned.
Signs and speculation pointing to a possible early election in Ontario. Plus, charging up the price, Tesla hikes up the cost of its cars. The price of a Tesla is going up in this country, and it will happen on the same day Donald Trump suggested he'll impose sweeping tariffs on Canada. Starting February the 1st, Tesla's least expensive car, the Model 3, will go up by $9,000. Other models will increase by up to $4,000. The company hasn't said why it's raising prices. So speculation is growing louder that Ontario Premier Doug Ford is getting set to call an election more than a year ahead of schedule. The latest hint involves word of a super caucus meeting this weekend. CTV's Mike Walker has the details.
Stay tuned.
It's the strongest indication yet from Premier Doug Ford that an election is imminent. Now the PCs are set to strategize for a snap election. A memo has been sent to MPPs, candidates, and campaign managers, inviting them to a super caucus meeting on Saturday. For weeks, the Premier has signaled he will need a mandate to spend billions of dollars in order to combat looming tariffs from the Trump administration.
But we need a mandate from the people. We need a mandate to protect and possibly spend billions of dollars to protect people's jobs, to protect businesses, and to protect communities. And there's only one group of people, one group that is going to give you the mandate, and that's the people, and that's what's great about democracy. They either vote a government in or they vote them out.
According to the memo, Saturday's meeting will include door-knocking training, candidate headshots, as well as fundraising insights. An election could be called as early as Wednesday. Experts suggest Ford wants to get ahead of an impending federal election while continuing to lead the polls.
So the only reason you're spending $160 million in the middle of this crisis with Trump is so that you can, that's how much an election costs, $160 million, is so that you can lock in this election for you.
The opposition has argued an election isn't necessary now.
Mr. Ford does not need a mandate. He has a mandate. He is the premier of a province. He has a majority government. He can pass any legislation he basically wants to.
Suggesting partisanship should be set aside to work together on the impending tariffs. Mike Walker, CTV News.
And as we head to break, many parents in Quebec had to find childcare today after more than 12,000 unionized daycare workers staged a one-day strike. The job action will affect around 400 daycare centres. The key issues are wages, workload, and support for children with special needs. The union and Quebec government will meet again next week to negotiate. Still ahead, tapping into Halifax's water woes. A boil advisory finally lifted, but how did it happen in the first place? A former Catholic priest has pleaded guilty to indecent assaults against 7 children in Nunavut. Eric de Jager also had 2 previous convictions for crimes against children and adults, dating as far back as 1978. The court heard the victims were as young as 4 years old. Well, if you live in the Halifax area, good news. Tap water is safe to drink again. 200,000 customers were under a boil water advisory for more than 2 days. An investigation is now underway to make sure it doesn't happen again. But as CTV's Paul Hollingsworth tells us, there are lingering effects. Okay, Paul, what are they?
Sandy, over a 2-day period, this caused a major inconvenience. Also, a lot of surgeries and medical procedures have been canceled and postponed. The boil order was first issued Tuesday morning after a power outage caused unchlorinated water to enter the system. Schools and businesses were impacted. According to the Nova Scotia Health Authority, as many as 220 medical procedures and surgeries were delayed. Some have yet to be rescheduled. Herman Piero drove more than 4 hours to Halifax from Cape Breton for lung cancer surgery, which was supposed to happen on Tuesday, but was postponed.
The delay was caused from the water boil issue. It's caused instruments cannot be cleaned, or the surgeons can't scrub in for the surgery, so they postpone me until a further date.
The surgery has been moved to Friday morning. The delay and the inconvenience is stressful for the entire Piero family.
The delay is making more anxious, we feel more anxious.
There are many questions as to how this could have happened. What exactly went wrong to cause the boil order? The Nova Scotia Utility Review Board has launched an investigation into this issue. Halifax Water has said they will not comment further until the findings of that investigation are made public next month. Sandy.
CTV's Paul Hollingsworth. After the break, Oscar snubs and surprises. This year's nominees and the Canadians who made the cut. The movies up for Hollywood's top prize were announced today, with musicals leading the way.
Are you English? No, I'm not English. Why?
The Netflix film Emilia Perez got the most Oscar nominations with 13, including Best Picture, and one for Carla Sofia Gascon, who becomes the first openly trans actor up for an Oscar. And another musical, of course, Wicked, is in the running for 10 awards, including Best Picture, tied for second with the epic drama The Brutalist, which also got 10. Quebec filmmaker Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 is also up for Best Picture, but he was snubbed in the Best Director category.
I've been trying to find out what happened at St. Joseph's Mission.
And the Canadian film Sugar Cane is nominated for Best Documentary. The film follows an investigation into abuse and missing children at a residential school in British Columbia. All right, so this is when we bring in CTV film critic Richard Krause for his thoughts on the nominations. So, Richard, any surprises here?
There were a number of surprises. I thought that Sebastian Stan's nomination for playing Donald Trump in The Apprentice was a big surprise. This is not a performance that has done well over Oscar season with the current political climate in the United States, given the fact that Donald Trump actually tried to squash this film and get it pulled from theaters. I thought that it was a big surprise that Sebastian Stan, who was great in the movie, by the way, was nominated for this performance.
Okay, Richard, Denis Villeneuve snubbed. Any other misses as far as you're concerned?
Well, for the snubs, I think about the Canadians, and my heart this year was with Pamela Anderson. She returned to the big screen in The Last Showgirl. She is tremendous in this movie. The movie is about a woman who was a dancer at a big burlesque show called Razzle Dazzle for 38 years. The show closes, and she is cut adrift. She doesn't know quite what to do, so she has to reinvent herself. And this, I think, is resonating with audiences because Pamela Anderson was sort of chewed up and spit out by show business in the late 90s and 2000s. She is back. She is better than ever. She's doing great work. And my heart really wanted to see her get an Oscar nomination. She got a Golden Globe nomination, so she may have to settle for that.
Okay, full disclosure to the audience, you and I chatted ahead of time. I know your heart is telling you something different, but if you were a betting man, officially what's in the cards? Let's go through this. Best Actress.
Well, Best Actress, I would be very surprised for Best Actress if it wasn't Demi Moore for The Substance. She really knocked it out of the park in a very strange movie, but has done really well during Oscar season here.
Okay, Best Actor.
Best Actor, I think, will be Adrian Brody for The Brutalist. People love this performance, already earned a Golden Globe.
Okay, and we're going to jump through the supporting actors to go right to the best film.
I think The Brutalist is the way to go. If you're filling out your Oscar ballot, that's the one I'd be ticking off.
Okay. And just quickly, we do have to do supporting actor and actresses. Both of them are, as far as you're concerned.
Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain, tremendous performance, riding high after Succession. And then Zoe Saldana for Amelia Perez, the most nominated film of the year.
Thank you, Richard. Time to head to the movies, right? And the 97th Oscars will broadcast live on Sunday, March the 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time on the main CTV network. And don't forget to catch the pre-shows as well. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Omar is here tonight, and Heather will be here tomorrow. Be well. Bye for now.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.